Let's talk about Instagram's internal triggers. Did you say you use Instagram? You do. What's your name?
Mary Beth.
Mary Beth. Do you remember the last thing you took a picture of with Instagram? If it's suitable for work?
No.
You're? No. Anybody remember the last thing they took a picture? You do. What did you take a picture of?
I took the train down this morning, so I took a picture of the view of the ocean.
Oh, the view, a view of the ocean. Fantastic. And what's your name?
Nicole.
Nicole. Fantastic. So I am guessing that that view of the ocean did not say, Nicole, take a picture of me with Instagram, right? She didn't have any kind of explicit information for what to do, why take out this app, and yet there was an association in Nicole's mind that when she sees something worth capturing, something worth saving, when she has this fear of losing this moment forever, the solution is Instagram. Instagram wins. Instagram solves this pain of losing this moment in time. And what other company comes to mind when I talk about the moment in the photography space? What other company comes to mind? About 30 years old. Right? Kodak. The Kodak moment. About 30 years ago, Kodak used to spend all this money on the Kodak moment. You all remember the Kodak moment, right? Do you remember the commercials that Kodak always had on TV? There was the ones, these very schmaltzy commercials, the one with the puppy dogs running through the grass, and the kids who would someday leave the empty nest. My personal favorite commercial was this one they used to have of grandma blowing out perhaps her last birthday candles. You remember this commercial? That's a real commercial. I'm not making up. Why did Kodak spend billions of dollars and almost 100 years teaching people about the Kodak moment? Well, they wanted to create an association in people's mind that when you see a moment like this, before it disappears into the ether forever, capture it with Kodak. Instagram did the same thing that took Kodak over 100 years and billions of dollars. Instagram did the same thing in 18 months with 12 people by having Instagram users teach other users what the Instagram moment is all about. But of course, Instagram does much more than the Kodak moment could ever do, because Instagram is also a social network. We use it for other reasons, and the more we go through the steps of Instagram's hook, the more we begin to form associations with boredom or the fear of missing out, FOMO. Right? Does everybody know what FOMO is? Fear of missing out. It's actually in the Merriam-Webster dictionary. Fear of missing out feels bad. We don't like that sensation that we might be missing out on something. And the solution to that emotional discomfort is found in our pockets, is found in this app. Okay? So that's a very, very brief introduction to triggers. Let's move on to the next phase of the hook, the action phase. The action phase of the hook is defined as the simplest behavior done in anticipation of a reward. The simplest behavior done in anticipation of reward. Let me show you some examples of a few habit-forming products. And I want you to see how simple these key actions, these key behaviors are. Something as simple as scrolling on Pinterest. Just that simple act of scrolling. Or searching on Google. Or what could be simpler than hitting the play button on YouTube? These extremely simple behaviors done in anticipation of a reward. And it turns out that there is actually a formula to predict the likelihood of these singular behaviors. It comes to us from a researcher at Stanford by the name of B.J. Fogg. Has anybody seen this before? Oh, good. This is new to most of you. Terrific. So this is a very powerful formula that Fogg poses that for any human behavior, think about this, any human behavior requires three fundamental elements. Sufficient motivation, that's the M. Sufficient ability. Ability is how easy or difficult something is to do. And the T stands for triggers. We just talked about triggers. So for any human behavior, any singular action requires these three elements: motivation, ability, and triggers. So let's walk through these. Motivation, according to Edward Deci, is the energy for action, how much we want to do a particular behavior. Now, psychologists have been arguing about the nature of motivation for decades and decades, but Fogg gives us these 6 levers that we can use to increase user motivation, because fundamentally, all human beings seek pleasure and avoid pain, seek hope and avoid fear, seek social acceptance and avoid social rejection. There's a lot more to be said about motivation, but for the sake of time, let's move on to the next part of B equals MAT, The A stands for ability. Ability is the capacity to do a particular behavior, how easy or difficult something is to do. And here again, we have 6 basic levers that we can pull on to make any behavior more likely to occur by manipulating how much time something takes, how much money something costs, how much physical effort is required. Brain cycles, this is a big one when it comes to interactive products, because it turns out that the harder something is to understand, the less likely that behavior is to occur. Social deviance says that we become more likely to do something when we see other people like us doing it. And then finally, non-routine says that we become more likely to do something simply for the fact that we have done it before in the past. And this is why habits are so powerful, because habits have this repeater effect. The more we do something, the easier it becomes, and therefore the more likely we are to do it in the future. What do we call that principle? It's called practice, right? The more we do it, the easier it becomes, the more likely we are to do it in the future. So the best predictor of what someone will do in the future is what they have done in the past. It becomes easier and easier to do the more we do that behavior. So Fogg puts these 3 basic elements of motivation, ability, and triggers on this graph that's really useful in a product development context. If you're building an experience for your users and you're wondering, hey, why isn't the user doing what I've designed for them to do? You can ask yourself, does the user have sufficient motivation? Motivation is here on the y-axis. Does the user have sufficient motivation? Does the user have sufficient ability on the x-axis? If a behavior is very easy to do, it's way over here on the right. If something is hard to do, it's way over there on the left. And if the user has sufficient motivation and sufficient ability, the behavior is easy enough to do, they cross that blue threshold, and the behavior will occur if a trigger is present. Every single time, online, offline, doesn't matter. Any human behavior.